Carol and Summers will receive nothing, the lawyer read, without looking up. Silence. The room didn't gasp, it smirked. I heard a stifled laugh from my cousin Denise. Her bracelets clinked as she reached for her glass of wine. Guess loyalty doesn't pay, huh? She whispered to no one in particular. My aunt shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. No one did. Not even my own brother. I sat in the corner of that two-white conference room, the only one not wearing black. I wore navy. My mother always said black washed me out. They didn't even offer me coffee. 26 pages. Properties, bonds, antiques, jewelry, all carefully assigned. Cousins who hadn't visited in years were gifted vacation homes. Denise's daughter got a ring my grandmother promised me when I was 12. My brother got the farmhouse. Aunt Margie, the lake cottage. Me, Carol and Summers will receive nothing. No explanation. No final message. Just a full erasure. As if I hadn't spoon-fed that woman's soup through chemo. As if I hadn't driven her to every damn appointment. As if I hadn't washed her hair when she couldn't lift her arms. The lawyer folded the will with precision. That concludes the reading. That was it. Denise popped the tab on a Diet Coke like we'd just wrapped up a barbecue. Someone joked about margaritas. I stood up slowly, gathered my bag, looked no one in the eye. I reached the door when my brother finally spoke. She probably thought you'd be fine without it. I turned slightly. She knew exactly what I'd be fine without. And I left. Outside, the wind slapped my face. Fall was coming early. The air had that metallic smell, like pennies and regret. But I wasn't crying. I wasn't confused. Because I already knew this wasn't over. I wasn't always the one who took care of her. There was a time when she didn't need me. When she was the fire in the kitchen, the sharp voice in the PDA meetings, the reason the Christmas tree was perfect and the cranberry sauce had orange zest. My mother, Elaine Summers, was the kind of woman who made things work no matter who broke them. She was also the kind of woman who didn't say, "I love you" out loud. Ever. Instead, she handed you orange slices wrapped in napkins or left $20 bills in your winter coat pockets for emergencies. Growing up, I was the quiet one. My brother, Nate, was the golden boy, good at football, charming, always calling her mama in that syrupy voice that made her melt. I was the one with books. The one with questions. The one who once asked, at 8 years old, "Why don't you ever hug me like you hug him?" She didn't answer. Just handed me a bowl of peaches and told me to go play outside. By the time I was in college, I saw her mostly on holidays. Short visits. Fast hugs. Denise and her crew always took up most of the attention. Anyway, loud voices, big hair, fake smiles. I didn't fit in. But I came anyway. Then Dad died. It was sudden. Stroke in his sleep. He was gone before the ambulance even got there. And just like that, the woman who ran 5 committees a week suddenly couldn't remember how to start the dishwasher. I came over to help, just for a weekend. I stayed 11 years. At first, it was the little things. Groceries, yard work, driving her to appointments. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 2 breast cancer. Then stage 3. Remission. Then another spot, this time in her liver. The others called occasionally. They sent flowers. Sometimes they brought casserole. But they weren't there at 2 a.m. when she was sobbing because the pain meds weren't working. They didn't clean up when she couldn't make it to the bathroom. They didn't rub her feet, comb her thinning hair, or listen to her cry about how her hands didn't feel like her own anymore. I did. And I didn't complain. Not once. Because despite everything, I believed she saw it. That she knew. That in her own silent way, she appreciated it. I remember one night, the electricity went out during a storm. The house was cold, and she was shivering despite 3 blankets. I lit candles and sat beside her. She looked at me and said, "You always know what to do." It was the only praise I ever got from her. I held on to that sentence like a relic. I still hear it in her voice sometimes when I can't sleep. But in her final year, something shifted. She grew more distant. Not physically, she still needed help bathing, still asked me to heat her tea just so. But emotionally, she stopped asking about my day. She stopped responding when I played her favorite songs. Then one day, I walked in and found Denise in the kitchen. She was pouring herself coffee like she owned the place. Her acrylic nails clicking on the ceramic mug my mother never let anyone use. She asked me to come, she said with a smug grin. Said she missed me. I said nothing, just took the mug from her hand and rinsed it. From then on, Denise came weekly, then daily. At first I thought, good. Mom needs to see her other family. Maybe it'll cheer her up. But then I started noticing things. The framed photo of me on the bookshelf was replaced with a group shot of Denise's kids. The book I'd been reading aloud to Mom disappeared, replaced with some celebrity memoir I'd never seen. And worst of all, the notebook I kept with all her medications and appointments missing. I found it 2 days later in the trash. When I asked Mom about it, she blinked and said, "Denise is helping now. You don't have to do so much." That night I cried in the car. Not because I was tired. Not because of the notebook. But because for the first time in 11 years, I didn't feel needed. And for someone like me, quiet, invisible most of my life, being needed was the only way I ever felt seen. Still, I didn't leave. I stayed. Even when Denise started managing the money. Even when Nate suddenly started showing up just to check in. Even when the hospice nurse told me they'd changed her care schedule without consulting me. I stayed. Because despite everything, a part of me still believed Mom knew the truth. I just didn't expect her to take it to the grave without ever saying it out loud. The room was colder than it needed to be. One of those sterile conference rooms in the back of a law office, where the lighting made everyone look a little dead and the coffee tasted like burnt cardboard. I arrived early, but all the seats around the long mahogany table were already taken. My brother Nate didn't acknowledge me when I walked in. Aunt Margie nodded vaguely in my direction, then continued her conversation with Denise about someone's second divorce. Denise, of course, had positioned herself directly beside the lawyer, sitting upright like she was preparing to receive an award. She wore bright red lipstick and one of those silk scarves she always buys in bulk from discount department stores and calls vintage. I sat along the wall. Not invited. Not unwelcome. Just there. Mr. Beringer, the estate attorney, adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. "This is the last will and testament of Elaine Summers," he began, his voice a dull drone. "To my son, Nathan David Summers, I leave the Sarasota property." Nate nodded, no surprise there. "To my sister, Margaret Louise Summers, I leave the lakeside cottage in Vermont." Margie pressed her hand to her chest, as if someone had just proposed to her. "To my niece, Denise Camille Hargrove, I leave my antique jewelry collection, in gratitude for her elegance, support, and loyalty." Loyalty. The word rang in my ears. My lips tightened, but I said nothing. "To Rebecca Gates, I leave the painting known as Northern Light." That one stung. My grandmother painted it. It hung in her hallway for 30 years. She promised it to me when I was 12. I stared at the floor, hoping the nausea rising in my throat wouldn't win. Then came the moment. "Carol and Summers will receive nothing." That was it. No clarification. No message. No explanation. Nothing. Just air. The kind of air that sucks the room out of your lungs. No one gasped. No one protested. The silence was heavier than shouting. Denise tilted her head and whispered, but loud enough for all to hear, "Well, I guess loyalty is subjective." Margie chuckled. Nate didn't even blink. I felt myself go still. A statue. I didn't dare move. My hands were folded in my lap, perfectly still, though my heartbeat was slamming against my ribs. "That concludes the reading," Mr. Beringer announced, already closing the folder. That was it. I sat there while they stood, stretched, laughed. Margie started talking about hiring someone to winterize the lake house. Nate pulled out his phone and began texting. Denise clapped her hands and chirped, "We should grab lunch." Celebrate mom's memory properly. I didn't move. I just watched them. Watched how quickly they turned this into a social outing. Watched how none of them looked at me. Not once. I stood up slowly, grabbing my coat without a word. As I walked toward the door, Nate said, without turning his head, "I'm sure she thought you'd be fine without it. You're self-sufficient." I paused, just enough to let the silence answer for me. And then I walked out. I had almost made it to the hallway when I heard Denise's voice behind me, coated in sugar. Maybe now she'll stop pretending she was ever part of the real family. That was the slap. Not the lawyer's words. Not the silence. That line. That smug, smirking little sentence that sliced cleaner than any will ever could. It wasn't the inheritance. It was the erasure. It was the dismissal of everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed. 11 years of feeding, bathing, sitting in ERs, watching her gasp through morphine haze. Gone. Dismissed. I made it to my car, sat down behind the wheel, closed the door gently, and just stared ahead. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than it had an hour ago, but quieter too. Like something inside me had finally stopped hoping. And in that silence, one thought came, clear as church bells on a winter morning. This isn't over. I didn't go home right away. I drove. Not with any destination in mind, just kept moving, watching the sun start to dip behind the trees, turning everything gold and hollow. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Every mile I drove, I replayed it. Over and over again. The will. The words. Denise's little smirk. My brother's shrug. That room full of people who had always treated me like a spare part finally saying it out loud. I didn't matter. And maybe that's what hurt the most. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the house or the jewelry or the land. It was the confirmation of every subtle cut they'd delivered over the years. Every time I was told to wait in the car. Every time family photos were taken and I was the one holding the camera. Every birthday party I organized but was never really invited to. Every Christmas where my gift was something small because they'd already spent too much on the kids. Every time I brought soup for Mom and Denise showed up after, empty-handed but walked away with praise. Every time Nate called her our rock when she hadn't even visited the hospital. Every time I swallowed it, smiled, told myself it's just who they are. It doesn't mean anything. But it did. They weren't cruel in obvious ways. They didn't shout or hit. Their cruelty was in the erasure, the quiet dismissal of my presence, the subtle suggestions that I was too intense, too sensitive, too serious. That I didn't know how to have fun. That I made everything heavy. I started believing it too. Started adjusting myself. Laughing quieter. Shrinking in conversations. Always letting others speak first. Letting them decide who I was. Even with Mom. Especially with Mom. I gave up a promotion once to stay near her after the second round of chemo. I told my boss it was temporary. I'd be back in 6 months. I never went back. I watched my savings drain, one pill bottle at a time, one home nurse at a time. She never said thank you. Not once. She would just nod or hum or say, "That's fine." And I told myself that was enough. That her silence was a kind of love. That maybe I wasn't supposed to need more. But I did. And now she was gone. And her final message, the last words she ever got to speak in this world, was this: I meant nothing. I pulled into a gas station and sat there, engine still running. I watched an older couple walk out of the convenience store holding Slurpees, laughing about something. The woman tucked her hand into the man's elbow, and they looked at each other like nothing outside of them existed. And all I could think was, I never got that. Not from family. Not from anyone. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, counted to 5. Then I opened the glove compartment, pulled out the sealed envelope I had kept for months, the one with Mom's signature on the front. Not the will. Something else. Something she gave me 2 weeks before she died. She told me keep it. Don't open it until everything's settled. I'd almost forgotten about it. I stared at it for a long time, then smiled. Not the kind of smile you share with others. The kind you give yourself when something clicks. When you realize the story isn't over. That it was never their ending to write. It was mine. I waited 3 days before I opened the envelope. Not because I was scared. Not even because I needed time. But because I wanted the noise to settle. The text from Denise asking about next steps. The voicemail from Nate saying, I hope there are no hard feelings. The email from the lawyer with the estate wrap-up schedule. They all acted like this was business as usual. Like nothing happened. Like they hadn't collectively pulled the rug out from under me and left me to hit cold tile. On the morning of the 3rd day, I brewed a strong cup of coffee, sat by the window, and slid my thumb beneath the flap of the envelope. Inside was a letter. 2 pages. Typed, not handwritten, classic mom. Short sentences. Formal tone. But then, paragraph 2. I know what they're like. I always have. I never protected you from them, and for that, I'm sorry. I froze. You were always the one I trusted. The one who didn't need to be told. The one who showed up. She went on not to explain, not to justify, but to confess. Quietly. Like a woman who finally understood that love isn't about expectation, but endurance. The others, they'll fight over what they think matters. They always have. But they won't find what really matters. I kept that with you. Attached to the letter was a smaller envelope. Inside it, a key. No explanation. No address. Just a number, handwritten on the back of the letter. Box 712. I knew immediately what it was. A safety deposit box. My parents had one for decades at Valley First Bank. After Dad died, Mom went alone. Always made a show of it. Just updating documents, she'd say, locking it away with that small, knowing smile. I had offered to go with her once. She said, no need. One day, you'll go for me. I never thought about it again. Until now. That afternoon, I drove across town, letter in hand, key in pocket, heart pounding like a teenager sneaking into a club. I parked in front of the bank. Walked in. Told the clerk I needed to access box 712. She checked the records. My name was there, added 6 months ago, signed and notarized. The box was small. Narrow. The kind that usually holds birth certificates or family jewelry. But when I opened it, it wasn't jewelry. Or bonds. Or some sentimental family heirloom. It was documentation. Legal files. And receipts. Dozens of them. I started reading. It took me 5 minutes to realize what it was. My mother had owned a stake, a significant one, in the development company that had built half the commercial properties on the south side of the city. Since 1987. Quiet shares, routed through a holding company in Delaware, then another in Kansas. Nothing flashy. Nothing anyone would dig into unless they knew exactly what to look for. And on one of the papers, a share transfer form, dated 3 weeks before she died. Signed over to me. Only me. There was a post-it note stuck to it, in her handwriting this time. I know they don't see you. But I always did. I stood in that vault room holding $10 million in real estate shares and felt absolutely nothing at first. Not joy. Not revenge. Not even shock. Just quiet. Then the noise returned. Like color bleeding back into a washed-out photograph. Because I realized they didn't know. They were still out there, laughing at me, feeling clever, tossing back wine glasses and talking about the girl who got cut out. They didn't know. But they would. Oh, they would. And not because I'd scream or shout. Because I'd smile. Because I'd let them walk straight into the consequence of their own arrogance. And when they looked up and saw me standing there, not empty-handed, but powerful, prepared, and patient, they'd understand. This wasn't their story anymore. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I didn't notify the family or reply to any of their messages. I waited. Because the difference between revenge and power is patience. Denise had sent another email, asking if I wanted to join the memorial brunch she was planning for Mom. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Let them think I was still licking my wounds, wandering around my little rented house, crying over a porcelain dish I didn't inherit. That was the image they always had of me anyway, the soft one, the quiet one, the one who wouldn't understand the complexity of family finances. I let them have that image a little longer, while I quietly started making phone calls. The first was to one of the partners listed in the development company files. His name was Theodore Myers, an estate attorney with an office 2 cities over. He remembered my mother immediately, called her sharper than all the men in the room combined. I told him about the transfer. He confirmed it. It was all legit. Signed, notarized, on file. I now owned 30% of the holding company that controlled 8 strip malls, 2 high-rise condos, and a biotech research center. Gross revenue, north of $20 million a year. "Do they know you inherited it?" he asked. I smiled. "Not yet." He paused. "Then you'll want to keep it that way. At least until the quarterly board meeting." I liked Theodore. He understood the value of silence. I asked him to represent me going forward. I told him I'd pay his retainer in full. He said it was already covered. "Your mother prepaid me. She said you'd come." That hit me harder than the numbers. She had prepared for this. For them. For the way they'd act. She knew her family. But more importantly, she knew me. Over the next week, I set everything in motion. I hired a private appraiser to evaluate the family properties they'd all inherited. Not because I wanted them, but because I wanted leverage. I met with the community grant board. Turns out, Mom had also earmarked part of her dividends to fund women's education initiatives. Through a trust. That I now controlled. Funny how she never mentioned it. Or maybe not funny at all. She'd always been good at long games. By the end of the second week, I was sitting on more financial and legal power than any of them had ever imagined. And still, they hadn't noticed. Because Denise was busy planning centerpieces for her brunch. Nate was posting photos from his new condo in Sarasota, bragging about his place, the one Mom left him. And Margie was asking on Facebook for recommendations for a luxury dog boarding service because she was flying to Aspen. None of them had even asked if I was okay. That was the best part. I didn't even have to act. I didn't have to pretend to be bitter or hurt or plotting anything. I just had to keep showing up exactly as I always had, quiet, background, invisible. Because when people assume you're nothing, they forget to watch you. And when they stop watching, that's when you move. The brunch was held at the rooftop terrace of a new boutique hotel Denise had been dying to break into socially. She sent invitations through an online platform, complete with floral fonts and an RSVP form titled "Celebrating Mom's Legacy." I didn't respond, but I showed up, wearing a navy blue pantsuit my mother once called dangerously competent. I arrived 10 minutes late. Not too early to look desperate, not too late to seem dramatic. Just perfect. The table was crowded. Nate, Margie, their spouses, Denise in a peach dress that did too much. They were already halfway through mimosas when I walked up. Conversation stopped the moment they saw me. Denise blinked, then quickly forced a smile. "Carol, you came." I nodded, pulled out a chair. "Of course. Wouldn't miss it." Nate cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable. Margie avoided my eyes, already sensing something off. The waiter came by, offered drinks. I asked for water. "So," Denise said, lifting her glass to Mom. To her elegance, her wisdom, her generosity. I raised my glass, but didn't drink. "You know," I said calmly, "it's funny you mention generosity." Denise's smile wavered. She was very clear in her will, she said, watching me closely. "Yes," I replied. She was. But that wasn't the only document she left. Nate scoffed. "Here we go." I reached into my purse, pulled out a thin folder. "This is a copy of the shareholder transfer form. Mom gave me her 30% stake in Southview Holdings 3 weeks before she passed." Silence. Then laughter. Denise's kind, strained laugh. Carol, that's ridiculous. Mom, never even. It's been confirmed by the attorney of record, I interrupted. Theodore Myers. You might remember him. He drafted the original holding company structure with Dad back in '87. Nate's glass clinked against his plate. So what? You have some paper? That doesn't mean anything. Actually, I said, it means I now sit on the board. Effective immediately. Margie finally spoke. But why would she? I mean, you didn't even what? I asked softly. Didn't even host? Didn't even smile at the right people? Didn't even wear enough pastel? The waiter returned. I took my water, sipped slowly. No one said anything for a full minute. They looked at each other, the gears in their minds grinding. Then Denise leaned in. Why are you telling us this now? I smiled. Because you're about to need board approval for that new leasing deal in Sarasota. Nate's face flushed. That's mine. That's in my name. The building's in your name, I said. But the zoning is owned by the holding group. And the group votes next month. So, I'll see you there. Denise stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've been planning this. No, I said. You did. I just stopped pretending not to notice. Margie pushed back from the table. What do you want? The question hung in the air. I let it breathe. Then leaned forward. Nothing. I just thought you should know that your little brunch isn't the only legacy Mom left behind. I stood up. Smoothed my jacket. Placed the folder gently in front of Denise. Consider this a courtesy. Nate opened it with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the first page. His jaw clenched. I turned and walked away. No raised voice. No dramatic exit. Just silence. Behind me, I heard Nate hiss, how the hell didn't we know? And Denise whisper, because we never thought she mattered. That was the best part. I didn't even have to say it. A week later, I walked past the old bookstore downtown, the one Mom used to love before the cancer stole her Saturdays. The display window was filled with gardening books and autumn candles. For the first time in months, I went inside. I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone. I just wandered, touched the spines, breathed in the paper and wood and quiet. The woman at the register smiled. Can I help you find something? I shook my head. Just looking. I paused, then added, actually, maybe something about orchids. She pointed me toward the back. We just got a new delivery. Orchids. Mom's favorite. Temperamental, quiet, easy to underestimate. I found a slim little volume with a green cover. Opened to the first page. There was a quote, "They only bloom when you stop looking at them too closely." I smiled. I bought the book. Walked outside. Sat on the bench across the street and let the sun warm my shoulders. My phone buzzed, a message from Theodore. The vote had gone through. Unanimous. Nate's project was halted. Denise had tried to oppose, but didn't have the shares. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because in the end, they were never the audience I was performing for. They thought they'd written me out. But I was never in their story. And now, they were no longer in mine.